Our next session, as we know, is called Cry the Beloved Country. I have been a journalist for more than 20 years, but never before have I felt so deeply, personally wounded by what we read in the news and the events unfolding around us. I've met many people who, yes, Mahua's here, the star. We're all familiar with the case of Bilkis Bano, and our next session will discuss how it is that we got here and hopefully discuss some solutions to how we can together get out of it. It's my pleasure to introduce Mahua Moitra, whose feisty, concise, passionate interjections in Parliament we're all very familiar with. Also with us today is Revati Laul, a journalist who has dedicated her life to building bridges across communities. In conversation with them is Samar Halarnkar, veteran journalist who's had a storied career. He is currently editing Article 14, which continues to fearlessly cover human rights and constitutional law matters, despite the changing environment in the country. Samar, over to you, and you can take this mic.
Good morning. We appear to have a full house, as might well be expected. We are certainly going to talk about the Bilkis Bano case, but we are going to talk about it as a metaphor for the state of the rule of law in India. Let me begin by briefly saying what the Additional Chief Secretary of Gujarat said when the remission of the men who were released was considered. He said the remission was considered because of the age, nature of the crime, behavior in prison, and so on. So let's quickly run through the nature of the crime, as the Additional Chief Secretary said. Bilkis Bano was about 19 or 20 when she was gang raped. Her mother and sister were raped as well. The head of her 3-year-old was bashed against a rock. 7 of her family were murdered. And this was not done by strangers, but people whom she knew. One of them, indeed, she used to call Chacha. So this is the nature of the crime. Having established this, let me begin right away by putting it to both of you. What does this say about the letter and the spirit of the law? Because we are not talking about just one case, but this is a case that represents a much larger malaise in the judicial system in India. Mahua, we'll begin with you.
This one. Hello. Use this. Hello. Thank you very much, Samar. Thanks, Revati, for being here. Hello, everybody. Very happy to see so many people interested in something as vital as this. Samar, actually, there was a little factual error. It was not 7 members of her immediate family. It was actually 14. Initially, what the reports were that it was 7, but actually it was 14 members of her immediate family. All of them were related to her. There was a 3.5-year-old daughter, her own child. There was a 2-day-old baby, which was also her sister's child. So she was raped 22 times. She was made to watch her sister being raped, her mother being raped, and they were made to watch her being raped. The reason I put all of this out there is that the nature of the crime, all of us sitting here should know exactly what it is. Okay? B, when we talk about remission, and the law of the land is that after 14 years, no matter how horrific the crime, and all of these men had sentences running concurrently, but there were 2 or 3 sentences for gang rape and for murder. Each man was convicted of murder, of gang rape, of more than one person. Okay? So that was the nature of the crime, that was the nature of the conviction. And yet, when they came out, what struck us, the Additional Chief Secretary is only saying something that is mirrored by lakhs and crores of people, not only within Gujarat, but everyone else in the country. this speaks volumes not about just state of law in the country, but the mindset of current day Indians, which to me is far more worrying. The law of the land allowed these men to walk free, but the people of this land, political workers, social activists, religious organizations, feted and celebrated these men with tilaks, with laddus, and with garlands. So it is not the crime just, it is not the fact that they were out. All that we can put in the domain of the judiciary and the executive. But what happened after is the malaise that is prevalent here. So I think that's the more worrying thing that we need to address more than amendments to the law and how remission committees should be set up.
Yes,
so
of
that's,
course, yeah.
you know.
Revati.
Thank you. And that's exactly, I agree with you, Mahua. When we consume, and we're all in a voyeuristic society, and we consume stories like the Bilkis story to say, how many times was she raped? Was her child's head dashed to the ground? Who raped her? What did she see while she was being raped? And we stop there because it makes you stop in your tracks and not look inside that story. But when this rape is being feted and celebrated, and when a BJP MLA in Gujarat says that these people were let out after 14 years of being imprisoned for being sanskari Brahmins, and when these people are garlanded, and the Prime Minister of this country chooses to be silent, then that silence speaks volumes, and our silence, as contrasted with the Nirbhaya rape which happened 10 years ago, where a middle-class Hindu woman was raped in Delhi after watching a movie at a mall, tells us that we live in two different countries. And the Bilkis case is about those two different countries we inhabit. So as a journalist and a political watcher and as an activist, I ask myself, do I want to continue to inhabit these two countries? So the Bilkis case is about all of us. The schizophrenic society that we are. The silence and the orgiastic fantasies of hate we play out through Bilkis's attackers. This is about all of us wanting this to happen in some way or the other. When we say, oh, yeah, I like Muslims, but you know, they're a bit fundamentalist, they have a few problems. Or, you know, look at Iran, look, they're brought up to behead goats, so they're brought up on ideas of violence. So we are the voyeurs of this society. We are the people for whom this garland, this performance politics is meant for. Because let's be clear, the politics we are practicing today is performance. It's a large orgiastic performance of hate that we are all participants in. And if we want to change that, we have to break this down into the everyday fascism and radicalization of each one of us that we're refusing to look at by pretending that it is the other out there and it doesn't touch me. And that's why the Bilkis case is important, for us to not look at what happened to her, but what's happened to us.
I want to circle back again to the points of the law. Because the points of the law are important to discuss because these are now being deployed in a variety of other cases as well. Only day before yesterday, I think, was it, that the Ram Rahim was freed, given parole, again for the nth time. I don't know how many times he's been out. So parole is obviously, this is part of the law, as Mahua had said earlier. This is all a part of the law. It is not illegal what has been done. Let's be clear about that. None of this is illegal, and the Gujarat government is correct in its submissions that this has gone according to the law. But the issue isn't that. It is how the law is increasingly being interpreted. There are so many, only yesterday, in fact, the Solicitor General went to rush to the Supreme Court, in fact, to try to keep in prison Professor G.N. Sai Baba, who had been given a life term for supporting, being a Maoist and supporting Maoists. He was freed by the Bombay High Court, Instantly, the Solicitor General went within 24 hours to the Supreme Court to say that this must be stopped and this case must be heard here and now. There are, as we were discussing earlier, the pendency rate in this country is, I think there are few countries in this world that have a pendency rate like this. There are any number of under trials, any number of people who have been convicted, who are up for remission, but nothing is ever done about them. So very clearly, in this sense, this has been politicized and this has been weaponized, has it not?
Well, of course it has, but if we look back, we dial back to the Gujarat riots of 2002, we dial back to the lynchings that have happened all across the country in the run-up to the 2014 elections, and the lynchings beginning in Dadri in Uttar Pradesh, where the attackers have been freed, also garlanded. So we are living in a time where this is a performance, and we are the audience. The performance is meant for us. So the rule of law actually breaks down because we have broken down. It's a mirror of who we are. We want this clearly. Let's look at Delhi. In Delhi, if we say that, okay, they threw out a BJP government and that somehow this sort of politics is represented in a loose way by the BJP, then they brought in an Aam Aadmi Party which has exactly the same kind of tendencies and did nothing 14 days after they were brought to power to go and prevent the lynch mobs out in the street, attacking Muslims in West Delhi. So this is what we demand as a people. So we've got to look at why this has happened. What is so attractive about this politics of hate? What is it that is sitting inside us that is making us so insecure about ourselves that we need to outsource this insecurity to the other and keep feeding that monster in order to live? We have become a middle-class Hindu, insecure society that feeds off hate. And then when we look around at the politics around us, around the world, there seems to be echoes of this everywhere. Not just in Brazil and the Philippines, but now in Italy. So when we see this everywhere, then we have to ask ourselves this question: does insecurity force us to create monsters, ethnic and religious monsters of our own other selves, our own brethren, in order for us to live? And how do we address that? I think the Bilkis case forces us to look at that bigger question. What do we need to do to address our everyday insecurities? And if this diet of hate is allowing aspirational castes and classes in India to kind of coalesce around this politics of hate and perform it in order to get a leg up in the party. Let's look at what happened in Muzaffarnagar in 2013, just before the BJP came to power. When they decided to fan the religious sentiments after an ethnic clash in Muzaffarnagar and use that to stitch together various Hindu castes together in order to create a consolidated Hindu vote bank that allowed the BJP to win almost a quarter of its seats in the next two Lok Sabhas in 2014 and 2019. We have to ask ourselves, what do we understand about ourselves then? That we feel more secure when we have someone else to blame. And when a society, I mean, when we look, the answers stare at us in the face, but we don't want to look at them. It's easier to just get stuck with the voyeuristic end of the crime and say, oh my God, this is terrible. And then shut down our ability to think and join the dots back structurally. Because that is too painful. It hits us in the face. It hits us in the face to see that we have different utensils for people who come to clean our house. We're casteist and classist, and we become more and more like that. We use COVID as a cover to say, this Muslim fruit vendor has spat on fruit. The district I work in Shamli in Western UP, Muslim vendors were not allowed into the villages where we work because they said that they spit on their fruits. Actually, basically, people stick stickers on apples because it makes the apple seem like it's a foreign product and therefore more attractive. And most of the vendors are Muslims. So they said, oh, they're spitting on fruits, they're spreading COVID. So this goes on and on and on. And if we then are plagued with this self-doubt, oh, should I buy that fruit? Should I not buy that fruit? Will my child go to a school that is sufficiently middle class and sanitized and therefore never play with children that are not like them? Then we are part of this mob.
So this whole, the diet that you're talking about that we're consuming, is this, Mahua, is this a political imperative in modern India? As a politician on the ground, do you see this as being something, she's talked about the Aam Aadmi Party being pretty much in that sense a B team of the BJP, and that all parties in some sense address and feed on this diet. Is this a political imperative in modern and new India?
I've never felt it to be a political imperative. I think I'm living proof that that it's possible to not engage in this kind of politics and still be a public representative and look at yourself in the mirror and be true to yourself. There are people who think that this is a political imperative, and there are parties who do that. I can only speak for myself and say that, no, I still think that it's not a necessity. But I do think it is important that we keep the discussion a little around Bilkis in this case. Because there are, when you talk about the law and Bilkis, the facts of the case, the problem with a lot of these things is, we are not, all of us, yeah, we read the paper, we skim it, we see it, but we don't really go into this. And there are some things, I mean, using this audience here, even if two of you go out and talk about this, I think that's going to be, 500 times 4 people, 2,000 people who'd be better informed about the case. And I think that's what's important. When we look at the law in this case, there are two things. Was the law broken? Did the government break the law? And the second thing is, if they didn't break the law, qualitatively, did they do say something which, like Justice Deepak Gupta said, was immoral, unjust, and unfair, but not illegal? So let's look at it in the prism of illegality, and second, through the prism of immorality, unjustness, and unfairness. So one is the question of legality. What is the question of legality? A, can they be up for remission? All convicts in this country under life sentences technically can be up for remission. A. B, there's nothing wrong with that. B, what was the policy for remission? In 1992, there was a policy of remission under which these guys were given. That policy was revised in 2014 with wisdom and experience, and grisly crimes like gang rape and murder were excluded. Now, criminal law has no retrospective effect. This crime took place in 2002. So technically, the government was not wrong in applying the 1992 case. But at the same time, nothing forced them to give them remission. They could have come and said that, look, they're up for remission, but the law 376G, which is the gang rape clause, there's been no amendment. The same crime, they are being still, the crime is as horrific. So in 2014, if they're not up, then by that standard, we don't think that even though it's come to the board, I don't have to, you've come to an interview, but I don't have to clear you. So they could have said, no, this was perfectly within the domain of the executive. So this is where it may not be illegal, but it was definitely immoral and unjust. The third thing is, again, the question of legality. This was tried under a CBI court. The Gujarat police, if you remember, there were 12 to 16 defects in the investigation. They wanted to file a closure report. Bilkis Bano, brave soul that she is, said this can't go on. She went to the Supreme Court, got a CBI, it was handed over to the CBI, handed over to the state of Maharashtra. 2008, they were convicted by a CBI court. What is the law? The law is very clear. Anything which is done under the Delhi Police Special Establishments Act, under which the CBI comes, you have to get permission from the trial judge, either who was presiding over the case or who is the judge today. Justice Salvi, who convicted them, said very clearly that he was not asked on the remission. And we do not know if the current judge was asked. Second point on legality, the union government has to be consulted on remission. Again, we do not know. The problem with this case is the remission order, even till today, has not been made public. When we are asked, people ask me, why are you bothered? Arey, Bilkis to jayegi. Bilkis should go for court. Bilkis should file a review petition. Yes, Bilkis should file a review petition. Locus is given to 3 people. The CBI, the state government, and Bilkis to file a review petition. But if the remission order is not made public, how on earth is Bilkis supposed to file a review petition? So are we all supposed to sit around waiting for 10 years, waiting for the Gujarat government in the largeness of his heart to make it public? So which is why we have gone to court, and the first thing we have asked is, please place on record all the facts. A, the legality of it. Was the union government consulted? Yes or no? Was the presiding judge of the trial court then, Mr. Salvi, consulted, or the judge today consulted? Yes or no? Then we come on to what the composition of the panel was. 10-member panel, 2 sitting BJP MLAs. Yes? 3 people who were social workers, all connected to the BJP. 1 district collector reports to the Gujarat government. Superintendent of police reports to the Home Minister of Gujarat. Jail superintendent reports to the Gujarat government. Do you see how biased this is? You have the MLA come out and say, we are not really I would urge all of you to go on YouTube and see what that MLA, who was part of the remission committee, what he said. He says, हाँ ये तो संस्कारी लोग हैं, अच्छे लोग हैं, ब्राह्मण लोग हैं, और we are not sure of the fault. You are on, these people have been convicted. Nowhere ever in 2008 when it went to review, 2019 when Supreme Court Justice Deepak Gupta awarded 50 lakhs in exemplary compensation. Bombay High Court called it a massacre. Called it a massacre. You are on the remission committee and you're not sure. The first thing that you have to do is to believe that they are convicts. Are you sitting on a remission committee of people who are innocent? What are we talking about? Please understand the facts of this case. The problem is people say, इतना पढ़ाई क्यों करती हो? अरे पढ़ाई करना पड़ता है, जानना पड़ता है. I heard somebody just now saying Rajiv Gandhi's policy of, what was he just saying? Huh? Sterilite was not Rajiv Gandhi, it was Sanjay Gandhi. Please educate. It is very sad if people like us here sitting in Kasauli Fest mess up Sanjay Gandhi for Rajiv Gandhi. Remember Turkman Gate. Remember what happened. Remember sterilization, Nasbandi. These are all part of our history. And if all of us sitting here don't know what happened with Bilkis, 30 years ago somebody will stand up and say, "Oh, jo Bano thi, they will mix up the Shah Bano case with Bilkis Bano." They will say Bano Bano. So please understand, it is important sitting here that we go into this. So let's understand the legality of it. And second, the unjustness. What may always be legal may not be immoral, may not be moral and just. So we are fighting for that. That's why we've gone to the Supreme Court. And if we had no locus, they wouldn't have issued notice, they would have thrown it out. The fact that we've got notice issued means we have a case.
So for those of you all who do not know, both
Very long answer.
No, I'm very glad you gave that answer because it was very important and very required. For those of you who do not know, both these women have gone to the Supreme Court against this court, for this case. And they are being asked, and that is the only thing that the men in their response have said, what is their locus? So the whole question is, of course, what is anybody's locus in any case? Then if you all stand aside and wait for the structures of the law and the process of the law to unfold as it does normally in this country, then nothing will ever get done. So I think it is a very good time now to talk about the way they have went at it, the way they went to the Supreme Court, and again circling back to the larger question of silence that we see so often in India, especially not just around this case, but around a lot of these things. If I may just slightly digress, I edit a website which deals with the rule of law in India. We have on our advisory board retired judges, some academics and police officers. One of the police officers, the retired Director General of Police, I will not take her name, she is very conservative, and she was contacted me one day. She even hesitates to talk to us about stories that we are doing. She had contacted me and she said, can I talk about this? You all do videos. I'd like to do a video. And it's available on YouTube. And she said that silence in the current situation, in this case especially, is a crime. And she said, I'm saying this as a police officer who has been involved in cases like this and who stayed silent very often, but we cannot stay silent on cases like this. Because these are of seminal importance to the Republic and the Constitution of this country as well. So can we talk about the silence that you have witnessed around not just this case, but around cases like this?
Yes, Samar. You know, the silence is deafening because it started in 1992 with the destruction of the Babri Mosque. 10 years later, we saw the fruits of that with the 2002 pogrom against Muslims in Gujarat, which was a fruit of the 1992, the large deafening silence of the burgeoning Hindu middle class that chose to say, hone do, dekha jayega, kya farak padta hai? You know, then in 2002, we have the Gujarat massacre in which Bilkis is one of the victims, and there's silence. And 20 years later, when her attackers are let out on Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we are faced with an election in Gujarat. The dates were supposed to be announced yesterday, and the Election Commission, not surprisingly, has withheld the announcement of dates. But political parties on the ground, of course, the BJP cannot be expected to make this an issue, but what is the Congress doing? Sleeping with its eyes wide shut. It has not made the Bilkis an issue. It's not made this an issue, but Gujarat is going to elections in the next month. Do the people of Gujarat even know? There's an entire generation of people. I have spent time in Gujarat, and that's what my book, The Anatomy of Hate, is really about why we are silent and what is it that this is feeding. But there is another way of looking at this, which is equally important as the silence. The performative part of this politics. Why do non-state actors keep propping up the mob in this way? Why do we keep having them garlanded, and why are these videos taken and put out there and spread all over the place? Because there isn't enough stickiness to this hate. And they constantly need to perform it in order to bring back people into the fold. So as someone who's actually studied the Hindu right very closely and written about the perpetrators of the 2002 mob from the inside track of their heads and their minds and their psychological and social spaces, I can tell you one thing that I learned, that this hate needs to be constantly performed because it doesn't sit still. It unravels, it changes, it morphs. In some cases, people transform from it. And that is what the Sangh is the most scared of. It does not want people to let go of this hate. So the more we realize that the performance is necessary to actually bringing people who are estranged from the fold back, there is hope there. And that is the side of the story the Sangh doesn't want us to see. And that is the side of the story we have to hold on to if we want to change this politics.
I would urge you to simply read her book, which is over how many years did you follow these? She followed 4 rioters essentially, and in a sense became a part of their lives, became their friends, etc. And is a remarkable chronicle of how people change. And I think there's also a metaphor for how change is possible in this country as well. Over how many years did you follow these 4 rioters?
13.
13 years. So it is a remarkable piece of work, a journalistic piece of work, a literary piece of work. You must definitely read that book. And it says in the book that the terrifying thing about a mob is not that we cannot understand how it operates, but that we can. So I think it's really important to read this book. But to come back again to the whole question of silence, Mahua, let's continue that discussion about the silence about this case, and specifically how that silence operates in the political spectrum.
Around this case, there were 3 reasons why the difference between Nirbhaya, like she said, and us, there are 3 reasons. One is we didn't see the kind of mass mobilization by PLUs, by people like us, on the ground, like we saw in Nirbhaya, for example. The candlelight marches, the crowds at India Gate. And there wasn't enough outcry. And if you think about it, what were the reasons? And there could be 3 reasons for this. One is post-COVID, all our lives are just getting back to normal. There's still not huge crowds everywhere. People are wary of crowds. So that is one reason why people are not mobilizing street protests and candlelight marches and all of that. That was one reason for not seeing it on the streets. The second is, again, the point we discussed, that Nirbhaya was something all of us could relate to. It happened in a metro city, happened in a bus, could happen to any of us, to our children. So it was a sense of being closer to home, whereas Bilkis happened during riots, which was a black spot in India's history. People don't really know what goes on in riots, what happens. It was 20 years ago. It's the tyranny of distance, it's the tyranny of time. The third very important thing is, which has also led normal people as well as politicians to give Bilkis's case a wider berth than other cases, is that the fact that her killers were convicted and that they got 14 years. So in a country where people don't get justice in so many cases, the fact that they got 14 years is somehow making up in people's minds for the fact that they should have been in for life. The point is, kuch to mila, 14 saal to tha. ऐसा नहीं कि कुछ नहीं हुआ, right? So the point is that the fact that they've served 14, but life is life. Life doesn't mean 14 or 15 or 16 or 18 or some kind of plea bargaining, especially in massacres like this, in heinous crimes like this. But in somehow, in even politicians' minds, as well as in life as a normal people, Bilkis is not really the case, the cause celebre, the case to take up, because it's like, अरे conviction तो हुआ था, right? Plus 14 साल तो थे.
Plus, she's a Muslim woman. She's a Muslim woman from a village called Randikpur, which doesn't matter to the rest of us.
And I asked that question. I remember tweeting this and getting a lot of flack for it, saying, why are you communalizing the issue? And I said, India had better make up its mind whether Bilkis is an Indian or a Muslim. If she's a woman or a Muslim. Because if she's a woman, make up your mind. Is she a woman or a Muslim? Because if she's a woman, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav is all about women, about Nari Shakti, about empowering women. We had our Prime Minister on the 15th of August stand up on the ramparts of the Mind Fort and say this Mansik Vikriti, which makes us mistreat women, this is what we must change. And I couldn't agree with the Prime Minister more. But then that doesn't tie in. If that's the case, then all the ruling dispensation, its ministers, its forces, its Nari Shakti Brigade, who raise their fingers and do all these histrionics in parliament, should stand up for Bilkis if she's a woman. Right? Which is not happening. That means she's not a woman. Then what is the other side? The fact that she belongs to, unfortunately, the 15% of the population who are second or third. Are 14 saal andar de diya, bahut hai bhaiya, khush raho. Right? And this weaponization, when you talked about weaponization, when they come out, why do you garland someone when you think they've done something good? When you come home after passing an exam, you're fed a sweet. If you're failed, nobody's going to give you a mithai when you come home. No mother's going to give you a laddu if you come home with 30%. You get 80%, you get laddus. So they've obviously done something good in the eyes of all these people. Right? So this is important. It's sending a message. Rape is an impact crime. It affects society. So it's not just Bilkis who's changed her home 30 times, 20 times after this. The entire village is on the run. They all feel insecure. Because the fact that these killers could come out and be feted and celebrated for having done something good sends this message, this weaponization of rape, that I can do it and I can get away with it, if not fully, well then very likely. Right? So this is exactly what it is, and this is what we must understand. Understand the facts. Only when we know the facts, only when we are informed is when we can do something. When I was entering politics, a lot of people said, oh, politics is so dirty, why don't you get involved with an NGO? But the issue is, if you're with the best of NGOs, you can affect 6,000 people. If you do politics right and you can change policy, you can affect millions. This thing of scale. So I always say that about knowledge. If you are better informed, the change you can bring about is always better. I mean, emotion armed with information always brings about better change than pure emotion. So that's something where I think all of us need to, move on.
So I actually greatly admire politicians because they do what someone like me has not done and possibly will never do, which is go out and walk the talk, which is what she has done, and which is what all politicians do. But this is, I think, particularly exceptional because she uses the facts that she has at her command and deploys them in making an argument. As someone who has gone out and stood for election and represents the people as well. This case, as we were saying, I will shift the conversation a bit because this case, as we were saying earlier, also represents a disunity, a schism in this country, whether you like it or not. And whatever the facts of the case are, however we look at it, it represents a disunity. Are there any opportunities for common ground, for unity? In the light of a case like this. We'll begin with you, Revati, because Revati is doing something very interesting. Again, she's doing something that I think I would never have done. She has been living for the last, how long have you been in Shamli?
2 years.
2 years she's been living in Shamli, Uttar Pradesh, which was one of the sites of the Muzaffarnagar riots. And her experiment that she's trying there is to get communities together And these videos are out on YouTube. I was fascinatedly watching one of these recently, where you're talking to locals who are saying, they urge them to go to the other person's house for the festival or host a festival for the others. And many of them have never, even though they live there, don't appear to have ever gone to each other's houses. And just the experiences that they talk about going to each one's houses and experiencing their hospitality is quite remarkable. Talk to us a bit about what you're trying in a place which was as riven and radicalized as Shamli.
Well, I chose to work and live in Shamli because it is radicalized in terms of caste, religion, and gender. And we work at all three intersections. And the reason for going there is to say, if we do not like this politics, this orgiastic fantasy of hate, how are we going to undo it one bit at a time? So let's choose a very polarized district. And let's see what we can do in that district. And if we can do that, it can multiply elsewhere. But what we're trying to do is, what I realized is that all of us left liberals are very good at talking to each other. What does the Sangh Parivar do? It talks to people unlike themselves, and that's how it expands. And we talk to each other, pat each other on the back, and Samar, you say Mahua, great, and I say Mahua and Samar, great, and then that's it, and we go home. And we don't talk to people who are unlike us. But how do you talk to people who are unlike yourself without preaching from a pulpit, without standing on a pedestal and making them feel small, without making them feel inadequate for not having the opportunities that we have to be born into an environment and with the exposure to think and contextualize the politics we live in, to see the performance of it and to join the dots. So how do we do that? We have to do that by, what I realized is there are constitutionally enshrined values of secularism, justice, fraternity, socialism. Those words were perhaps in some sense slapped on from the top by an educated elite, but it was up to the rest of us to actually hold that and make those values tangible, living, breathing objects that help people improve their everyday dal, roti, pani. Otherwise, people in the villages where we talk, and we say, sir, hey, yaar, haan, very good idea, very good. Arey, bahut acha hai, Didi, bahut acha baat kar rahe ho. But after 2 minutes, it goes in from one ear and out the other ear, unless you can make those values have some stickiness, give it a utilitarianism. So what we're trying to do is to say, okay, if you in this particular village in Shamli come from, let's say, a Kashyap Jati, an OBC caste, and you want to file a case because you've been beaten up by the Jats, a dominant caste, but also OBC. You've been beaten up by them, you go and file a case, and the policeman happens to be from your caste, so you're lucky. So you try and then vote in the next panchayat election for someone from your caste. That is going to be very short-lived dividends for you. Unless we show people that building a fraternity that is not feudal, that is not based on just your caste or your religion, can have tangible benefits, we're failing at actually bringing the constitution back to the ground. How do you do that, though?
So how are you doing it?
Yeah, so what we're doing is, we started in the middle of the pandemic. So the first thing we did was to address health, because health was broken. The primary health centers and the sub-centers were not functioning. The district hospital was set up for the first time in the middle of the pandemic. Out of 40 doctors' posts, 38 were vacant. So we said, okay, we are going to tell people that if you band together across different castes and religions, you can actually get your health system to start, and you can get doctors to come and treat you for free. How do we do that? We ran a signature campaign, got 6,111 signatures from across 43 villages, took those to the district magistrate. And we said, here's a petition, and we are demanding one thing. Until you can fix the local hospitals and sub-centers in the villages, hold free health camps. Once she said yes, because of the pressure of all of these signatures, and because she believed in the idea, therefore these health camps started to get set up. So people saw that a fraternity of many castes and many religions was giving them something that they could use. A free health camp where they could get checkups. And in a district where there are no public health professionals, she got private practitioners to do this. Because they were beholden to her perhaps for, various permissions, challans, whatever reason. I don't know the reason. The fact is, we could use this to counter-proselytize and tell people, This is how a fraternity matters. This is how the constitution can get some stickiness on the ground. When we say join together and form a sangatan, a brotherhood, a sisterhood that consists of many castes, many religions, it can allow the system to bend and bring doctors to you. Later, it can help fix your subsystem, which is what we're doing, or sub-center, which is what we're doing now. Slowly, we can show people how stitching together a fraternity like this can make them safer, help them file cases when they get bashed by a dominant caste. All of those things, when they see it working on the ground, then we can stitch the ideas of the constitution to that. But first, there has to be a utilitarianism. The problem with us is we talk, and we are not actually a reading writing society. We are not a social contract based society. So we brought in a liberal idea from the West of a constitution, but we haven't given it teeth. We haven't smashed the feudal patriarchal norms in order to make these values walk on the ground. That's what we're trying to do. It's an uphill task. Don't ask me how we're going to do it or if we succeed. All I know is we're trying.
Is this what do you think? Do you think this is something that can be duplicated? Because much as I admire it, I have my doubts whether this is something that can be sustained and replicated.
I want to answer that.
Okay.
3 days ago, we had a health camp with people from a denotified criminal tribe, people who've been oppressed for a century and a half, labeled as criminal tribes, the Bavarias. We used to sit with them, and they used to sit under posters of the RSS ideologues, Hegdewar and Golwalkar. 2 of those leaders walked out of that Sangatan and into ours. Last week, they made fiery speeches at the health camp about the need for a fraternity that stitches people together across different castes and communities. We didn't ask them to do this. In April this year, we gave each of our leaders in the 15 villages and 1 urban area that we work in 1,000 rupees each to hold iftars and Eid Milans for Muslims. And we gave these to Hindus who are big fans of the present regime and its diet of hate. They held iftars. A woman who was previously part of this fan club of the present regime held an iftar in her home for 75 Muslims. A young boy in a village that was the epicenter of the Muzaffarnagar Shamli riots, in a village called Lisad. I'm very proud of him, Kuldeep. He held an iftar for the 1 remaining Muslim in the family, despite the fact that during the riots, his village was overtaken by the mobs. They were not too unhappy with having seen the Muslims being pushed out of his village, and he was duped by a Muslim. They bought land from a fleeing Muslim, but he had sold it to someone else. So he had a personal grouse against Muslims. He put that aside to hold an iftar for the 1 remaining Muslim in his village and his friends this Eid. So things can change. The problem is when we look at the big picture, it's so scary that we don't want to try.
Mahua, the big picture?
You know, there is no big picture. It's all little pixels making up pictures. So, like I said, when there really is no big picture. It's human beings sitting in groups everywhere that make up the polity. So there could be 3 people sitting in a tea shop, and there are millions of these tea shops which multiply. So I do agree with the fact that the only way there's going to be no magic wand which is going to come away and say, all right, the present dispensation goes. The problem is not just the present dispensation, it's the crores of people who vote for the present dispensation. Are you also going to make them go away? Yeah, you can't. So the question is all these little things which make up, and it's up to all of us, where I think the big picture is change. Now you can do it with an NGO, you can do it with whichever way, but all of us have to realize what's right and wrong and stick up for what's right and wrong. And we have to do it as part of our daily lives, because the problem is when we're all leading daily lives, we don't have time to, it's almost fashionable in our circles. I have people who come to me and say, oh, you know, I'm really not into politics. I don't really interest politics, but aap mujhe bahut achhe lagte. So it irritates me so much, I almost feel like slapping them. I'm just like, kya achhe lagte? Maine aankh achha lagta hai, aankhein achhe lagte, kya achhe lagte? Right? Kya, you want to hear a speech? So cinema dekh lijiye na. Kya achha lagta hai aapko? Because the only people who can say politics does not affect them and they can remain apolitical is because their privilege encapsulates them in a bubble where they are removed from politics. You are removed from politics because you don't depend on politics for a basic right to education. You can afford to change your children to a good school, no matter who, whether it's BJP, Congress, TMC in power. You don't care, right? You can come to the Kasauli club and have a drink in the evening, whether it's whoever it is, it doesn't matter. So because our wealth, our education, our pedigree, our elitism insulates us in bubbles that we can even make ridiculous remarks like we're not political. You're part of the polity. Everybody is political, right? So it doesn't mean that politics doesn't mean that I've got to go out with a janda saying TMC or BJP or Congress. Politics means caring for the polity and deciding what's right and wrong for this country we all live in. So in a sense, we all have to be political, and that is the big picture. That's all there is to it.
Excellent, thank you. We'll open up for questions. May I request you to simply quickly ask your questions so we can get as many as possible in. Please avoid giving lectures to our guests. Please ask them questions and they'd be happy to answer.
Yes, please. I'm sorry to be a bit, but please let's keep it to no thoughts, just questions. Thank you.
I know you're asking for only questions, but I'm sorry, I'll have to remind you that Ms. Laul mentioned about silence and the problem it creates when you don't speak up for others who are oppressed. Ma'am, I'm sorry, you took the date as 1992. I would like to remind you what happened in 1984. So let us not forget that. I think we have, I am also a social activist in Punjab. We look after our Muslim friends, Hindu friends, Christian friends in the same light. I only hope that 1992 was only 8 years later than 84. You remembered 1992. I hope after 8 years you don't forget 1992. We must also remember 1984. You have taken up this fantastic case of Bilkis Bano. There were many who were raped in 1984 who still haven't got justice. Fulka, of course, is fighting for whatever it is happening. But this is one of the things that even Mahua mentioned, that let us get our facts also correct. 1984 doesn't need to be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
No, of course 1984 doesn't need to be forgotten, and thank you for reminding us all. I'm very, very well aware of that. I have written about it extensively. But the reason I chose to start with 1992 because I'm mapping the diet of Hindu hate that has become majoritarian. And 1984, in a sense, was a precursor to that because it's always Hindu versus someone. Hindu versus Sikh, Hindu versus Christian, Hindu versus tribal, Hindu versus someone or the other. So yes, in that sense, 1984 was a precursor to what we saw in 1992, but in a slightly modified, different version. And I also do not think that it's essential for us to get into a whataboutery of let's include every pogrom that happened. 1984 was horrendous, and I'm not exonerating it or holding a brief for anyone that was participant in that. I'm only saying let's map where we are today. And in that context, I use 1992 as a benchmark, not the only. Thank you.
So on that today note and on the silence note, there was another silence about 85 years ago in Europe. Did history teach us anything about how to not remain silent? What can we do now? Because there were people like me who participated in the silence then, and I guess I'm participating in the silence now. So does history teach us anything, or do we, well, just talk?
Oh, history, I remember giving a speech in Parliament, and it was called The Great Betrayal. And in that speech, I had talked about how we were celebrating the anniversary of the Holocaust, and all the remaining survivors, there were 20 of them, whatever, who had gone. And they said that the fact that we are here today, let the world never forget. That was the most important lesson, is that we do not forget. And everyone who was part of the Holocaust, so it's not that it wasn't just Goebbels, and it wasn't just Hitler, and it wasn't just Göring. It was every single person who pressed the button of an incinerator. If you think about it, there was a company that made incinerators. And it was a very wealthy German family that made these incinerators. And they were so happy that they were creating these state-of-the-art incinerators that they completely forgot to think about what use these incinerators were being put to. So instead of killing being able to burn 100 bodies in an hour, they were being able to burn 200 bodies in an hour. So I think the same thing happens to us as well, is when we are thinking of, not to say anything against Aadhaar or anything, when we are thinking of efficiency of certain technologies, and we say, we don't stop. Even people in business, technocrats, bureaucrats, they're trying to make a system more efficient without realizing what is that efficiency being used for. And that is something that history should teach us, that all of us, we're all equally culpable. It wasn't just that you were manufacturing an incinerator. What was it being put to? You knew what was being put to, right? So when you are talking about a technology that is mapping a person's gender and his caste and his religion to his voting preference, what is it being used to? When you're taking my name and my number, when I'm paying cash to buy something for 200 rupees, where is that database going to? Yes or no? So I think we are all culpable, and something we have to be aware of all the time. So history teaches us only as much as we want to learn. Right?
As a quick aside, one of the people who funded Hitler, the family, Krupp, take a look at the railway line that runs outside here, and take a look at the ties, and take a look there, you'll find Krupp. Go ahead.
My question is addressed to Revati. Revati, your experiment really raises hope. You have done so much. But my worry is, yours is a seed that has been planted. It's taken you 13 years to reach here. There is a tsunami happening in the same, the timeline of that tsunami is humongous. It's much worse than what happened. My extreme worry is that while these seeds are taking time, and they're wonderful that you're doing what you're doing, what is going to happen to the rest of India? Because those seeds are going to take their time, and the tsunami is not going to wait. So in this timeline, how are we ever going to be able to compete and catch up and put down what we know is hatred? We know it is anti-constitution. How on earth are we ever going to stop that?
We must all become Revatis.
No, I think we must all become our own sort of fighters of this, of these radicalized forces. I don't have an answer to that, because it's not possible for one person to do more than just one tiny little bit. And yes, we are up against this massive behemoth that has swallowed us whole. But you can sit inside the throat of the beast and give it the worst throat infection. You can kill it, you can kill its gut. And let's hope we can do some of that.
Madam, here we go. I was in a school, very good boarding school, and I read books, history books, and it said Akbar is kind though he was Muslim. And what are the great qualities of the purity of blood? That's the kind of books which are being written and being read. Until and unless you don't address the issues of education in school. For example, in England, religion, sex, and British history is these are compulsory subjects, and the way religion is taught is to integrate people from various societies. My question is, how hopeful are you, Mahua, that we will be a changed society from this politics of hate to one of love? So would you put it modestly 200 light years or 100 light years?
No, it's nothing like that. And I think that these questions, the fact that the general public, the general voting public who presses the button and votes in the ruling dispensation, thinks that it is the onus of only opposition politicians to be responsible for this is itself ridiculous. I'm sorry to say this so bluntly to you, but this is the plain fact, right? So the education policy, the central education policy, is written by the central government, and different states write different policies. Now, if you read 1984, if you've read 1984, and if you see, and if you've also read, if you see how the Third Reich started, it all starts with young minds. So the idea that you have to get into young minds and change what they're thinking is an idea as old as time. And this is something we're doing. So if as a guardian or a parent, your child is in school and you look at the book and you think that there's something wrong with it, you can go and tell the school, I'm not okay with my child being taught this book. You can form a guardians forum, go to your local MLA and go to the state education minister and petition them and say that this is not history, this is bakwas, and we don't stand up for it. Why isn't there, of all the guardians, this is something that is in your hands to do. It's not something that I, as a parliamentarian, can change the education policy or what is written in a textbook when education is not on the concurrent list, it's on the state list, and the government of Himachal is writing its book thing, the government of Bengal is writing its own thing. So, for example, in Bengal, when there's an example of something being written, there's a huge hue and cry, and people come and this thing's written about in the papers, and the education minister has to come out and give a statement saying, I'm going to look into this. So that's the kind of public pressure that does it. So that's the kind of public pressure that the public is also, it is incumbent upon you to do. It's not something that a politician can sitting here and provide hope. My job is not to provide hope. My job is to do something on the ground that you guys get hopeful about. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
We're
so sorry.
completely out of time, so
Excuse me,
we
ma'am.
have to
One
wind
second.
up.
I only want to congratulate these lovely ladies who are doing marvelous work, and I wish we all could follow you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So sorry, if I could please, excuse me, Miss Mahua. Sorry, ma'am. Hi. Good afternoon. First, here, ma'am. Hi. First, I'm a huge admirer, and second, I just wanted to ask both of you, why is it only that when we witness something this horrific, when we witness something this heinous, do we wake up to the fact that legality is not, if something is legal, it's not always going to be moral or just? Why is it not that we realize while we're studying it? I apologize if this question sounds blunt, but
I mean, it's just normal human nature. You cry when someone dies. You don't think about death when you're in happy times. It's just exactly the same reason, right? When something hits you in the face is when you react to it. That's human nature. It's part of a biological and chemical process, is my answer, unless Revati's is different.
No, I agree with you.
Thank you.
If
Thank you,
I-
Mahua, Revati. I'm
If-
sorry, we have to
if
put an
I
end to
may-
this.
If I may congratulate you both for what you are doing. But my take on this is what Gurpreet said just now. This all emitted from the 84 riots. And not enough was done like it is being done today.
Shall we discuss this
Uh,
later,
uh,
one-on-one?
let-
Maybe you can have a word with the ladies.
If you let me just
one-on-one.
finish. Just let me finish. I see this rot setting it further. Please understand, both these political parties were national parties. It is a game played by these people. And what I see actually is the disintegration of this country if we carry on like this. We all must be aware. It started with the Sikhs, it's going to the Hindus, it's going to go to different communities of the Hindus. It's going to be north and south. What is culturally, what do I have in common with the South Indian? But the country. Unfortunately, I think where you should also hit are the institutions. And the first institution that has to be hit is the bureaucracy. The politician is accountable every 5 years. The bureaucrat from the age of 22 to the age of 60, and after that he gets re-employed in different avenues. These people, unlike the defense services...
Thank you. Sir,
where
that's a
they are
very
weeded out.
interesting
Sorry,
thought. May I
let me-
request you to
let me
please take
finish
it up
this.
one-on-one? I'm sorry, I have to end this here.
One second.
We're running into other sessions
Okay.
now. Thank you very much for that
Thank you.
thought. Please discuss it one-on-one. Sorry, that was interesting, feisty, sparking off little explosions of thoughts and even arguments. I think that is what the best kind of literature festival is really all about, where we can all come together, discuss controversial things and still remain friends. I'm also hoping some of us will be able to take on the challenge that Mahua has just thrown at us, to do something as citizens. Thank you very much, everybody.